Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of death. Amen.
Behold the handmaid of the Lord.
Be it done to me according to your word.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of death. Amen.
And the Word was made flesh,
and dwelt amongst us.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of death. Amen.
Pray for us, O Holy Mother of God,
that we may be made worthy of the promises of Christ. Pour forth, we beseech you, O Lord, your grace into our hearts, that we, to whom the incarnation of Christ, your Son, was made known by the message of an angel, may by his passion and cross be brought to the glory of his resurrection, through the same Christ our Lord. Amen.
The Education Department says over 28 million students are enrolled for the school year. Most are in public schools holding full face-to-face classes. Some schools, however, will still keep on with blended learning, while others will stay in purely remote learning setup before the mandatory in-person classes in November. Vice President and Education Secretary Sara Duterte says the return of students to in-person classes is a victory for the education sector. Duterte visited the Dinalupihan Elementary School in Bataan with nearly 2,000 students. The Vice President led the National School Opening Day program, inspected the classrooms, and interacted with some students.
Isang malaking tagumpay para sa mga kabataang Pilipino ang muling pagsisimula ng in-person learning ngayong araw na ito. There are no excuses. Hindi na po natin kaya na muling maantala pa ang pag-aaral ng mga kabataang Pilipino. Kailangan na po natin silang maibalik sa in-person learning.
Among the challenges schools are facing, assuring students and parents that the return to classes is safe amid a raging pandemic. Senior correspondent David Santos takes us to a school in Quezon City.
On the first day of mandatory return to school, a mix of both relief and anxiety for a number of parents.
Mas matututo po sila kaysa sa online kasi tamad sila mag-aral minsan.
Ayun nga po, yung ibang bata po hindi sila vaccinated, ganun. Nag-aalala po ako, baka mahawa.
The school band playing festive music in a bid to calm nerves in this age of COVID-19. After over 2 years, teachers and students back in their classrooms.
Unang-una, na-miss na talaga ako, no? Nung pag-pray namin kasi 2 years. So, hindi madali sa online.
Outside the school, some worried parents refusing to leave.
Kailangan po namin matiyak po nakataw sa loob ng room po yung bata.
Basta nakapasok na, kalma lang po tayo, sir.
More than 8,000 students from kindergarten to grade 6 are enrolled at the Corazon Aquino Elementary School in Quezon City this year, still an average number compared to pre-pandemic school years. Making students, especially smaller children, understand the need to follow safety measures adds up to the layers of challenges schools are facing this year. All the measures we expected are in place.
Social distance po.
Social distance.
Tapos nag-use po ng alcohol araw-araw.
Lagi po nagugas ng kamay.
Lagi po mag-face mask po.
Windows without curtains for better ventilation. Physical distancing for chairs and desks. And recess no longer in canteens. Students are encouraged to bring their own baon or have food served to them by volunteers. Hindi ba kayo natatakot sa COVID?
Natatakot rin po. Magpapabakuna na rin po. Natatakot naman po. Mas okay naman po ngayong face-to-face. Saka po, namimiss ko din po yung mga kaibigan ko na lumipat na.
But since infection rates have not spiked considerably, school authorities are hoping it will stay this way.
So ang magagawa lang namin is to monitor kung ano bang kondisyon ng bata nang pumasok siya.
In the meantime, the hybrid setup stays with full in-person classes set to begin by November.
4 days face-to-face, 1 day online on a Friday, and we will gradually transition after a month to a 5-day in-person classes now. para lang maka-adjust sila.
A new normal as the new school year begins. David Santos, CNN Philippines.
One of the largest secondary schools in the country, located in Pasig City, also opened to students and teachers today, even if some areas of the school are still being used as quarantine facilities. The story from Chrissy Di Matulak.
Richard Santos has a daunting task ahead of him. He is the newly appointed principal of one of the largest schools in the country. Rizal High School has an estimated 12,300 enrollees from junior to senior high students this school year. For the first few months, the school will be employing blended face-to-face learning.
Ang base po namin for this school year ay binubuo po ng dalawang set. Set A at Set B. Yung Set A, so for this week, sila yung magre-report, and then yung Set B, next week naman sila magre-report sa school.
Students and teachers alike were in high spirits for their first face-to-face flag ceremony. According to those we spoke to, being among peers in school makes learning more focused and personal.
Mas madali po kasi pag face-to-face, natututo sila mag-aral.
Makakasama ko na po yung mga kaklase ko, tsaka yung mga teacher po makakapagturo na po sa amin ng mas maayos.
Dito ay makakausap mo ng maayos ang mga bata, mas direkta mo silang matuturuan, kitang-kita mo kung sino ang nangangailangan ng atensyon sa hindi. Magagamit mo yung mga estilo mo o style mo sa pagtuturo sa mga bata.
At the moment, some buildings at Rizal High, namely the RCE building and the gymnasium, serve as quarantine facilities. School personnel assured that the perimeter is well guarded and they will make sure that no student will loiter in the area. According to the Department of Education, facilities will be cleared out by October to make way for the full implementation of face-to-face learning in November. School officials say they are eyeing to use around 300 classrooms by November to accommodate the whole student population and to make sure no one is left behind. Chrissy Di Matulak, CNN Philippines.
Education spokesperson Michael Poa says the school opening today was smooth and no major incidents reported. Poa says most of the issues and queries at their command center received were related to school enrollment policies. Now, despite some bumps in the road, transport authorities say it was still generally orderly as the number of public transport vehicles available on the first day of classes was enough to meet the demand. George Quiles tells us officials also said the traffic situation was not as bad as anticipated.
Authorities grapple with students, parents, vehicles, all outside the school premises as they try their best to make sure going back to school is safe.
Tumukod kami dito kanina, which is very chaotic in some way dahil naghalo na yung tao sa tricycle, sa motor, sa sasakyan, sa public utility. Something that we do not want to happen.
While different agencies have pitched in personnel to help maintain order, the MMDA says better coordination is needed.
One thing that's important is to synchronize all our efforts para hindi masayang yung dami ng enforcers.
Transport regulators warn drivers against failing to follow road safety rules, like this bus with wipers and signal lights that don't work.
Inspect po natin yung roadworthiness, mga dokumento, yung bang mga driver ay may mga lisensya na angkop dun sa pinag-drive nila.
While traffic congestion cannot be avoided in some portions of Commonwealth Avenue in Quezon City and areas near schools, overall, traffic volume was lighter than expected. LTFRB says there are enough public utility vehicles to serve passengers.
From Fairview naman po, kaya galing po doon yung mga FX po, kaya hindi po mahirap sumakay.
Based din ho sa feedback natin from our operators, kahit po yung mga kabubukas po ng mga rota, nasa daan mo sila at sufficient po ang ating public transportation po for our students.
Bante na po.
Transport Group Manibela acknowledges the move to reopen previous routes. It adds there could have been more PUVs on the road had the decision to reopen old routes been announced earlier. The group says some of its members failed to register their vehicles for the past 2 years because of the pandemic.
Ipakiusap na po natin yan na sana ma-waive yung mga penalties para mapabilis na po yung pagpaparehistro namin kasi hindi naman po biro yung penalty na babayaran po namin.
CNN Philippines has sought regulators for comment, but the LTFRB has yet to respond. George Quiles, CNN Philippines.
Because of Tropical Storm Florita, classes are suspended tomorrow in schools in the province of Aurora, except in Dingalan Municipality. This is for students in the preschool until senior high school level, both in public and private institutions. Signal number 2 up in the northern and central portions of Aurora as of 5 p.m. More stories up ahead as lawmakers dig deep into the aborted sugar importation. A congressional hearing reveals conflicts within a regulatory body. And the House of Representatives receives the first national budget proposal under the Marcos administration. Keep it here on Newsnight.
My faith in God led me to all these blessings. Kaya ako, all out sa lahat ng bigay ng Panginoon. Spirit, mind, and body. Sa tulong ng exercise, healthy diet, and MXU+. Sabi ng tatay ko, when you put God first, you will always be first. MXU+ with CoQ10 and L-carnitine, my plus in life.
Mahalagang paalala, ang MX3 Plus ay hindi gamot at hindi dapat gamiting panggamot sa anumang uri ng sakit.
Friends, try nyo to. Vet-approved Nutri-Chunks in lamb flavor. With active boost and prebiotics na pampalisto. Made with real lamb goodness. With essential nutrients to help keep them strong, healthy and happy. Listo, ganado sa Nutri-Chunks.
Magaling ang sarap, nagalagab lang. Sarap ulitin, susulitin ikaw. Ito ang tama. Go sexy strong. Ito ang tama.
Welcome back to CNN Philippines. It was a sweet deal becoming sour as lawmakers questioned former sugar regulators over supply issues. More details about their supposedly illegal importation orders surfaced. Let's bring in Lois Calderon for the details.
Another bitter interpellation in Congress. The subject was the country's sugar supply, put in the hot seat were sugar regulators who resigned after President Bongbong Marcos vetoed an order that supposedly would bring in 300,000 metric tons of imported sugar. Former Sugar Regulatory Administration Chief Hermenegildo Serafica and Agriculture Undersecretary Loio Cadjo Sebastian field questions from lawmakers. More details on how they wrote the sugar order surface.
Alam mo ba kung kailan unang nalaman ng ating Pangulo yung importation plan na pinagagawa sa inyo noong August 1?
Nung hinatid ko po yung importation plan sa office po ni Undersecretary Sebastian. Ang alam ko po, nag-submit siya ng memo sa mahal ng Pangulo.
And that was what date?
August 5.
Sinabi ba ng Pangulo na a-approve niya yung inyong importation plan o kinakailangang ikonsulta niyo muna sa kanya kung kanyang a-approvean?
Ang sinabi lang niya po, Your Honor, submit an importation plan.
Okay. At hindi rin sinabi ng ating Pangulo kung gano'ng karaming metric tons ang i-approve niya sa inyong importation plan.
Hindi po.
Questions centered on procedures, whether or not Serafica and Sebastian went out of bounds when they crafted the import order. Lawmakers are building a case that it's President Bongbong Marcos who should be calling the shots, being the Agriculture Secretary and Chairman of SRA. The regulator's defense was that farmers and the sugar industry were consulted and plugging the deficit was urgent, but the attacks are coming from several quarters, including within the SRA. Pia, back to you.
Lois, any other new revelations in today's session?
Well, the session revealed internal squabble within the agency. There was an order saying heads of agencies ended their term last June 30. Serafica said he's not covered by that order since the agency is a government-owned and controlled corporation and there has to be proper transition. But his deputies and the legal team allegedly wanted an OIC, effectively not recognizing his authority. One of his deputies told lawmakers they were left out when Serafica crafted the order. Let's listen to what Serafica said.
I was a victim of MC1, Memorandum Circular number 1. When it came out, the 3 deputies and the legal department manager talked among themselves that, our term ended on June 30. So I felt that they breached my trust as far as SRA below me, officials and SRA. And at that point, as I said earlier, we have so many sugar orders precedent on these issues, and it is just a question of getting the current data needed in crafting such sugar order.
Yeah, it's a complex web that lawmakers are trying to untangle now. They're also sorting out a problem with the Bureau of Customs. And this concerns whether sugar seized from a series of raids in Bulacan, Subic, and other warehouses had import clearance, because that one, Pia, is inconclusive. Back to you.
Lois Calderon reporting. In other news, the president submits to the House of Representatives the proposed national budget for 2023. Find out the government's spending priorities in this report by Cian Arcangel.
5.268 trillion pesos. That's how much government plans to spend next year as submitted to Congress. President Bongbong Marcos says he wants the proposed budget to result in economic transformation and inclusive growth. Education tops spending with nearly 853 billion pesos. The agency handling infrastructure projects is next with 718 billion pesos, followed by the health sector with nearly 300 billion pesos. Social welfare will get 197 billion pesos, while spending for agriculture, now headed by the president, will be up by a hefty 32% at 184 billion pesos. The Budget Department says infrastructure projects that are good to go will get 1.2 trillion pesos. The country will also pay off debts worth 611 billion pesos. With only 244 billion pesos added to the current budget, the DBM admits it cannot grant all spending requests, even for key projects like the construction of new classrooms. No funding as well for the 500 peso increase in monthly pension for poor senior citizens. Meanwhile, the purchase of COVID-19 vaccines is subject to reaching revenue targets.
We also recognize that they needed certain amounts for their priority projects, but not to the extent of what they want. I'm talking about the basic education facilities, where they mentioned that they required 86 billion pesos. At this point, I think we only provided 5.9 billion for next year. We would like to defer to the wisdom of Congress on this, although we will be providing them with the utilization rates of various departments so that they will at least know where it can be sourced.
Speaker Martin Romualdez says the House of Representatives will scrutinize the General Appropriations Bill with barely a month left. The budget is first submitted to the House before it goes to the Senate. The House plans to end Appropriations Committee hearings by September 16th, plenary debates begin September 21st, and final approval by September 30th before Congress goes on recess.
Every centavo of the national budget will be spent wisely to implement programs that would save lives, protect communities, and make our economy strong and more agile.
Lawmakers have earlier held preliminary budget hearings for minor concerns.
We are confident that many of the policy concerns raised by our members would have been resolved, so that we expect a swift and smooth plenary debates on September 21.
Budget hearings will begin on Friday with a briefing from members of the administration's economic team. Cian Arcangel, CNN, Philippines.
The proposed allocation is worth more than this year's budget of 5.2 a little over 5 trillion pesos. Breaking news at this hour, the health department has detected and isolated the country's 4th monkeypox case. The 4th case is a 25-year-old Filipino with no documented travel history from any country with confirmed cases of the viral disease. So far, all 4 monkeypox cases in the Philippines are isolated and unrelated to each other. We'll give you more details as soon as they become available. Moving on now to other stories. 2 leaders of the New People's Army reportedly killed in a motorized boat explosion in Catbalogan, Samar early this morning. Benito and Wilma Tiamzon, Chairman and Secretary General of the New People's Army respectively, were said to be on the boat with about 10 armed or were among these 10 armed individuals. During a gunfight between the armed forces and those on board, the motorized pump boat suddenly exploded. Troops were conducting a waterborne interdiction operation in the area. We now go above and beyond the headlines with the Division Command of the 8th Infantry Division, Major General Edgardo Bugi de Leon. Good evening, General de Leon. Thank you very much for joining us. Can you tell us first, at this point in time, sir, as of 6:20 in the evening, alam na po ba natin if Benito and Wilma Tiamzon were on that boat or not? Do we already know that information for sure?
As of now, we don't have any physical evidence to prove that the Tiamzons are aboard the said motorboat. The report that reached me and in my personal debriefing to the troops involved, there are no physical evidence as of now that would prove that they were there, because after the gunfight, there was a sudden explosion that transpired that totally destroyed the boats. No, so when the troops reached the area during sunrise, no, the incident happened at 4:20 a.m. No, total darkness. So when the explosion happened, they were almost blinded, no, because they were wearing night vision goggles. So they awaited for the sunrise to transpire. No, after sunrise, when they approached the area, all they saw were pieces of debris scattered in the water. So I asked them if they were able to see any indicators of human
remains,
cadavers or what, but they told me wala sila nakitang cadaver sa area. So I cannot as of the moment, I cannot confirm whether or not the so-called Tiamzons were there in the boat.
However, the problem, General De Leon, is that there was a spot report that was released by the units involved, which is entitled, and we quote, "Neutralization of CTG or Communist Terrorist Group leaders Benito and Wilma Tiamzon." With all those details, as you already narrated in that spot report. Para bang nauna ata yung spot report, medyo excited po ata ang pagka-release.
No, I released my spot report before noon time. No? So there was no mention of any personalities that were casualties in that operation, because I quoted directly the report from the operating troops. It's the Joint Special Operations Task Force, Trident, that we created purposely to help us. I'm the commander of Joint Task Force Storm, and we have been on an ongoing massive operation since February this year, particularly focusing our operations in Northern Samar, purposely to constrict the NPA terrorists towards the uninhabited hinterlands in the tri-boundaries of Northern Samar, Western Samar, and Eastern Samar. So we have received information that there would be an attempt of the cordoned NPA groups to split into smaller groups and sneak out of the area through the river tributaries towards the western portion of the island. So we alerted our naval component, and true enough, on around 4:20 in the morning today, there was a waterborne interdiction that transpired. But the report that they gave me during the brief encounter, suddenly the boat exploded. There was a huge explosion. And they were not able to see any
General De Leon.
human remains after the explosion.
General De Leon, I know you are referring to the statement or press release of the 8th Infantry Division, your division, and it says Joint Task Force Storm press release August 22, 2022 from Captain Ryan D. Layug, Philippine Army Chief Public Affairs Office. It is entitled Hostile Motorized Boat Explodes in Samar. However, before po this was released, earlier during the day, meron pong nag-circulate na isa pang spot report na kung tawagin at ang title and neutralization of CTG leaders Benito and Wilma Tiamzon in the number 1 on or about 22:04:20 hours, August 22, etc., etc. So meron pong nauna pong lumalabas na spot report. It was written like any normal, regular spot report. And that was what had circulated bago po na-release yung sa inyo, kung saan hindi nyo po pinapangalanan ang mga Tiamzon. But the problem was there was an earlier one that named them. So are you saying po na yung earlier one was that a leak? Napaaga yung report, hindi po siya that was not cleared by the top brass. It was not cleared by you. And somebody had just sent it out? I mean, kaya po lumabas yung pangalan ng mga Tiamzon.
I don't know. I cannot speculate on that because the official report emanated from me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I am the source of the spot report, and the spot report that I submitted to higher reports does not bear any names of casualties because we do not have any physical evidence. Now, if they're going to ask me to confirm it, I cannot because what if suddenly these people will surface out and they'll provide proof of life?
Okay, but the information that your troops got, which is the reason for this naval interdiction, kaya po haharangin sana or i-confront, dahil nga nandoon ang mag-asawang Benito and Wilma Tiamzon. Is that why there was that operation?
No.
Not the Tiamzons.
The operation was conducted because of our continuing efforts to destroy the NPA formations. We are running after formations or NPA groups, not personalities. So our operations is not focused on specific persons, but on particular NPA platoons that we have been running after for the past few months. So when I directed the naval component to conduct maritime or waterborne missions, it was intended to interdict an armed group without particular personalities. That's why I'm wondering why suddenly the names of these personalities crop up.
Yes, we are also wondering why, General De Leon. We're wondering why because yun ang unang umikot na balita.
Yeah, we are tracing saan nanggaling yung information na yan.
Oo. Alright, anyway, ubus na po yung oras natin. Pero maraming salamat po sa inyo, Major General Bugi De Leon, 8th Infantry Division Commander. Thank you, sir, for joining us this evening. Coming up, Gilas gears up for the FIBA World Cup qualifiers with arguably its most talented team yet. You're watching Newsnight on CNN Philippines.
Dangerous out there. Buti na lang there's locally super fruits. Para sa akin, super nutritious, super delicious. All superfruits contain more antioxidants than your average fruit. Superfruit for super you.
Making headlines in sports, the TNT Tropang Giga drew first blood in the PBA Philippine Cup Finals versus the San Miguel Beermen after a last-second, or rather 0.1 second save from Jason Castro. Castro nailed a jumper without much time left for an 86-84 finish at the Araneta Coliseum in Quezon City. The action continues on Wednesday with Game 2 scheduled at 5:45 p.m. And as expected, NBA star Jordan Clarkson and big man Kai Soto bannering the 13-man Gilas Pilipinas roster as the national team faces Lebanon on August 26, Philippine time, for the FIBA World Cup Asian qualifiers. Japan B-League imports like Dwight Ramos and Kiefer and 30 Ravenna are also suiting up for Gilas. One name will be cut a day before the match for the official 12-man lineup.
They are not necessarily the best players in the country, but they are the best team to play against Lebanon, no? Based on who are the available players. We are confident we will play well. Siyempre, hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na siguradong tatalunin natin. Pero siguradong lalaban tayo ng magandang laban.
Samahang Basketball ng Pilipinas Executive Director Sonny Barrio says, unlike in previous campaigns, Gilas will have a much taller lineup. And that is it for tonight. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
This program.
RPN Radio Philippines Network. Radyo Ronda DXKS Surigao. Member, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Health officials say that one of the leading causes of mortality in the Philippines is pneumonia, an infection in one or both of our lungs. The most common symptoms are cough, fever, chills, and having trouble breathing. On its own, pneumonia poses a serious health risk as it attacks our lungs that basically help us breathe well. But pneumonia caused by the COVID-19 virus is a different story. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and you're watching MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Who are at higher risk of pneumonia? Well, these are the really young and the really old. To help us with today's discussion, joining us are Dr. Ivan Villespin, who is a pulmonologist and the immediate past president of the Philippine College of Chest Physicians. Also with us is Dr. Jade Javier, who's an infectious disease specialist from the Batangas Medical Center. I'll start the discussion kay Dr. Ivan muna. Please walk us through some of the common symptoms kapag ang isang tao ay meron ng pneumonia.
Symptoms may vary, but the most common are cough, which may be dry or productive with greenish, yellow, or even blood-stained mucus, chills, shortness of breath, vomiting, diarrhea, headache, runny nose, loss of appetite, etc. Now, depending on the causative organism.
Are there any ways in your practice that pneumonia can be differentiated from the simple case of flu or the common cold?
So colds, the symptoms may take time to develop and include cough, sore throat, stuffy nose, sneezing, watery eyes. Usually there's no fever. Then the flu, the symptoms, they hit fast and often include extreme fatigue with body ache, muscle ache, loss of appetite, headache, high fever, chills and sweats, stuffy nose again, and coughing. These three conditions can overlap. So yung sinabing flu, before the COVID, yan yung trangkaso. Ngayon pag sinabi mong tinatrangkaso ka, now you have to seriously think of COVID.
Dr. Ivan, kapag merong pasyente pumunta sa'yo with possible pneumonia, are there any tests that you perform para to confirm the infection?
We base it on a good clinical history. Dapat magaling ka kubuha ng kwento, chismoso ka dapat. And a focused physical examination of the chest or the lungs. Now we ask about the patient's the recent symptoms, the environmental exposure, the past health problems, smoking history, especially, and comorbidities such as diabetes, hypertension, asthma, kidney disease. After which, we request for diagnostic workups such as the chest X-ray, where we look for certain X-ray patterns which can point to a possible bacteria or virus as a cause of pneumonia.
Now, the more common causes among Filipinos are viral and bacterial. I'll go now kay Dr. Jade. Let's explain to the viewers, ano ba yung difference ng viral and bacterial kung pneumonia din pala ang mangyayari din dito?
If we base it on the symptoms themselves, bacterial and viral pneumonias really have overlapping symptoms and even signs. So, pareho silang pwedeng magkaroon ng ubo, sipon, lagnat. But for viral pneumonia, sometimes they really start as a simple viral illness, just like the flu. So first, they may come out as body weakness, muscle pains, colds, and sometimes even sore throat before patients develop cough and difficulty breathing.
Is there certain characteristics of a cough ng isang taong infected na with pneumonia? Pagpasok pa lang ng pasyente, pinaubo mo yung pasyente, is there a certain characteristic na alam mo nang, parang pneumonia na to?
Iba-iba po ang klase ng ubo. And sometimes, especially in the elderly and those in the extremes of age, some people with pneumonia might not really manifest that much with cough. Some elderly populations, hindi naman masyadong maubo, but when you do some tests, you examine them, they have signs of pneumonia. So if we are to base our diagnosis and the cause of pneumonia on the cough, I don't think that will be a very, very accurate measure. Iba-iba po talaga.
Let's start first with the viral pneumonia, which as the name implies is caused by a virus. Now the common cause is the flu or ang trangkaso, but you can also get it from common colds and other viruses as well. Dr. Jade, apart from it being caused by a virus, what other cues indicate that this type of pneumonia is viral and not bacterial in nature?
A lot of things overlap between bacterial and viral pneumonia. But let's take COVID, for example. No?
Right.
It's one of the most common viral pneumonias that we have right now, even more common than influenza. No? Well, some clues will be sa imaging studies. So there are major differences in imaging studies, or when you say imaging, for the lay, X-rays or perhaps CT scan. So there are differences, but are not absolute differences between bacterial and viral etiologies. And we can also refer to some of our tests. Like for example, if we request for a CBC, that's a basic laboratory test, it's a blood test. If we have bacterial pneumonia, we expect an increase in the WBC count. But if it is a viral type of pneumonia, we expect a low or probably a normal WBC count. These are just a few clues for us to differentiate, but there are other special tests that we can do, such as PCR, and some multiplex PCR tests that are available in especially in the tertiary institutions that can help us differentiate the etiologies.
Now, most people who get COVID-19 have mild to moderate symptoms, but some can get severe pneumonia in both lungs. Dr. Ivan, pag-usapan naman natin to. How does pneumonia develop in people with COVID-19?
Not all patients with COVID-19 will develop pneumonia. Not all of them. So in fact, only the moderate, the severe, and the critical cases are associated with pneumonia, regardless of whether they are young, old, previously well, or they have comorbidities. No? Pneumonia usually would start after more than a week from the onset of the patient's symptoms. Okay, the illness starts with the inhalation of the virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and travels from your nose, your mouth, down to the airways, to the air sacs we call alveolus, where the spike protein of the virus will attach now to the ACE2 receptors, present in many parts of our body and the vessel wall, causing an inflammatory reaction.
We'll discuss how pneumonia affects people from different age groups. We're your connection to healthcare, and you're watching MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines.
Para sa sakit sa ulo o kilanat, unsa nga tambal dapat?
Para na ako kanang isog.
Langga, para nako kanang luwas magpaayo. Di na kinahanglan mamili. Mag-Biogesic. Parehas ka maayo sa isog pero luwas tumaron. Kana ang alagang Biogesic.
Uy!
Pwede man di parehas. Maayo! Ingat!
Unilab yan.
Paracetamol is the generic name of Biogesic. If symptoms persist, consult your doctor.
Protektahi ang imong mga mata batok sa delikado ug makadaot nga ultraviolet nga silaw sa adlaw ug uban pa. Pinaagi sa pagsulob og eksakto nga prescription sa antiyohos o antipara. Likay ang mga simptomas sama sa hanap nga pananaw sa layo o duol nga basahon, sakit sa ulo ug uban pa nga makaapekto sa atong kahimsog nga ang hinungdan depekto sa atong mga mata. Alang sa kumpleto nga primary eye care, contact lenses, fashion eyewear, computer eyeglasses, sunglasses, accessories ug uban pa, adto kita sa AG Buñuel Optical Clinic. Ang AG Buñuel Optical Clinic nagpahinumdum kanato nga ang kahimsog sa atong mga mata usa ka prioridad nga angay ipa-check up kausa matag tuig aron pagsiguro nga luwas kita sa piligrong mga sakit. Pinaagi sa lisensyado og qualified optometrists nga maoy mo prescribe sa eksaktong kagamitan og kung primary eye care ang paghisgutan. Duaw lang silang buhatan sa 3636 sa Nicolas Street, Surigao City ug adunay ilang extension office sa Aurelianida Street, Cantilan, Surigao del Sur. Ayaw kalimti higala. AG Buñuel Optical Clinic.
Ang AG Buñuel Optical Clinic doon na branch dito sa lungsod sa Dapa sa may Lupis Haina Street, Poblasyon Dapa, Surigao del Norte.
Ang AG Buñuel Optical Clinic dinhi sa syudad ng Surigao no transfer na sa bag-ong location sa Nicolas Street Ragyahapon, tapad sa Garcia Hotel at bang sa Unicity. Ang Riverside Parts Master Incorporated na sa ilang bagong location sa Dalan, Burgos, ning atong syudad. Mahimo niyong tawagan sa telephone number 231-7478 or 826-3663. Mga produkto nga inyong mapalit, genuine, Makita Power Tools sama sa planer, drill, grinder, Triton paints, construction supplies, angle bars, flat bars, GI pipes, automotive spare parts, Firefly electrical devices sama sa switches, bulbs ug outlets. Adto ang Riverside Parts Master Incorporated sa ilang bagong pwesto sa Dalan, Burgos ning syudad. Makahangyo ka o makabarato pagyod diha sa Riverside Parts Master Incorporated.
Aniya na ang food supplement nga kumpleto, sakto o aprobado. Ang Calabo Plus Herbal Capsule. Calabo Plus Herbal Capsule. Maayo alang sa pag-maintain sa imong maayong panglawas, kahimsog ug kapiskay sa mga pamati. Calabo Plus Herbal Capsule. Pakusog sa enerhiya ug stamina. Mupalikon sa imong immune system. Calabo Plus Herbal Capsule. Andam sa pagpakigbatok sa mga nagkadaiyang balatian. Musulay pumaka sa uban, diri na kita sa kasaligan. Calabo Plus Herbal Capsule. Calabo Plus Herbal Capsule. A quality product of Jesser Marketing. Palit na karon sa mga butika.
EXL Makabuhay Plus Dietary Supplement. Nakakatulong iwasan ang iba't ibang uri ng sakit tulad ng diabetes, arthritis, rheumatism, hypertension, cancer, urinary tract infections o UTI, respiratory tract infections tulad ng ubo, sipon, lagnat, heart attack, constipation, fatigue, kidney, lung problem, premature aging, memory loss at depression. EXL Makabuhay Plus Dietary Supplement. Buhay at makulay ang buhay sa EXL Makabuhay.
EXL Makabuhay Plus Dietary Supplement. Mapalit sa pinakadool nga butika o drugstore sa inyong lugar.
O, anyari sa'yo? Ba't nakasimangot ka? Alam ko na. Masakit ang katawan mo, ano?
Sa sobrang trabaho? O di kaya masakit ang ulo sa sobrang stress? Break ka muna. Hinga ng malalim at imasahe ang ulo mo gamit ang Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Ako rin ganun eh. Kaya pag mataas ang tensyon sa trabaho, mag-Herbalaya break ka muna.
Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Amoy na kaaya-aya. Sa bawat pahid ay ginhawa.
Up next, we'll talk about how pneumonia affects different age groups and how to treat and prevent it. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and you're watching MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. We're together in health. Now, before we go into that, I'd like to ask Dr. Ivan, when it comes to pneumonia ng COVID-19, are the symptoms similar?
Whether it's dry or productive, cough, fever, and labored breathing or difficult breathing. When you're given that triad and then you listen to their chest and you listen to crackles, that's pneumonia. Then we call that community-acquired pneumonia. Now, let's talk about COVID. Now, during this time, given that same triad, the burden is on you now to rule out COVID pneumonia. Patients will complain of loss of smell and loss of taste. Now, when you hear that, those two symptoms, we call it now a COVID probable. So while the chest X-ray may seem normal, the chest CT scan will reveal the distinct, what we call the ground glass abnormalities. That's only noted on the chest CT scan very clearly.
Because they say that this pneumonia is more common in the really young and the really old. Dr. Jade, why is it the case? What is it about the really young that makes them more predisposed with pneumonia?
So for pneumonia in children, a few factors that come into mind will be, of course, number one, the maturity of their immune system. Mas marami silang mas hindi pa sila exposed, no, sa mga most common types of bacteria or viruses that us adults have already been exposed to, and therefore we are already immune to those types of bugs.
One of the best ways to prevent a disease is taking a vaccine that is available for that. And there is a vaccine available for preventing pneumonia. Now, Dr. Ivan, is taking the vaccine for pneumonia a good preventive measure given to the old? Definitely. How about for the young?
You need to get a flu shot every year to prevent seasonal influenza. The flu is a common cause of pneumonia. So preventing the flu is a good way to prevent pneumonia. Okay? So for protection against certain bacteria that can cause pneumonia, we follow the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, USA, which recommends two pneumonia vaccines. The pneumococcal polysaccharide vaccine, okay, or the PPSB23, is recommended for adults 65 years and older, and anyone 2 years and older with an underlying condition that may increase their risk for pneumococcal disease. The pneumococcal conjugate vaccine, which is the PCB13, is recommended for adults 19 to 64 with immune-compromising conditions such as chronic disease of the heart, the lungs, the liver, the kidney.
Now, Dr. Ivan, punta naman tayo sa treatment. How is pneumonia treated in adults, especially those, katulad na minention ni Dr. Jade, adults with comorbidities, and how can this be prevented?
Usually, pneumonia can be treated at home, but in serious cases, it may require a hospital stay. Now, these management principles I just mentioned are intended for the regular pneumonia that we're talking about, but not necessarily for COVID pneumonia.
Okay.
Apparently, there's a wide variability in the prescribing behavior of the doctors or even the specialists, notwithstanding the availability of local and international guidelines. For example, our Living COVID-19 Philippine guidelines, of which I'm a member, we recommend against the use of azithromycin, very popular now, among patients with COVID-19 infection. We have a moderate quality of evidence and a strong recommendation for that antibiotic. Yet, we observe a large-scale abuse and misuse of this antibiotic. That is the driving force behind the concept of antibiotic stewardship. I'm not saying that we should not give antibiotics to patients with COVID pneumonia. Rather, we should be mindful in the judicious prescription of antibiotics, Freddy.
Dr. Jade, how effective now, almost 2 years into COVID-19, how effective is the treatment now for COVID pneumonia?
I can say that relative to our experience before all of these treatment modalities have been present, certainly the outcomes of our COVID-19 patients have significantly improved, given the number of options that we have right now in terms of monoclonal antibodies, antivirals, and other procedures that are options for treatment of COVID, especially for those who have severe to critical infection. But since we are talking about treatment, not all COVID patients need antibiotics. Let's remember that COVID is caused by SARS-CoV-2, which is a viral, it's a viral infection, and antibiotics do not have a strong role unless there is strong suspicion by the doctor that there is a co-infection, aside from the viral infection. So it shouldn't be a knee-jerk response na, may COVID, bigyan natin ng antibiotics. No, hindi, they don't have a role on the treatment, general treatment of COVID-19.
Okay. Now, when we return, we'll talk about how pneumonia affects the elderly. We'll also discuss some of the prevention and treatment methods available. Your health is our mission, and this is MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines.
Maayong balita sa tanan sa atong panginahanglan sa panimalay, mga gamit, ingon man mga dekorasyon, pwede na natong mapalit diha sa Wellington Bazaar. Anausab sa Wellington Bazaar ang mga bistidahon, karsunison, plain t-shirt, plastic chair, floor mat, mantel, banig, folding bed, habol, mosketero, trapal, lideret, basketball, stuffed toys ug mga dulaan sa bata. Ang Wellington Bazaar ana magalagad kanato sa Dalan Kaymo ning Dakbayan sa Surigao. Wellington Bazaar, gikan sa mga kawani ug tigdumala sa Wellington Bazaar. Mayong adlaw alang kaninyo. Wellington Bazaar, sukiyon ta sa kanunay.
Uy, Day! Naunsa man ka, Day?
Day, kanang glisod na mo kakita, Day. Uy!
Isos, naunsa ba ka? Uy nga, katong ni aging bulan. Okay pa man ka. Naunsa Day karon?
Laot siguro ni sisingunit aning cellphone kanang si computer, Day.
Da, mo lagi na akong ingon ba? Uy, Day, nakoy balita para sa imuha. Gamit og Lutein Plus, uy!
Lutein Plus?
Oo, tungod ang Lutein Plus, Day, duna kini 13 ka-ingredients. Hindi lang kini para sa mata, kundi sa imuhang tibuok lawas. Nga maka-assist pod sa imuhang anxiety ug depression.
Ang Lutein Plus, usa ka award-winning brand nga gikan pa sa New Zealand.
The award-winning supplements from Clean Green, New Zealand Omega Plus ang support sa heart and blood system. Ang Lutein Plus ay 13 ka mga ingredients, lakip ng vitamins A and C. Dili lamang kung maradyaw sa atong pananaw, nagsuporta sa bini sa ato interulawas ning panahon nga jari kita kuman sa COVID-19 pandemic. Kinahanglan magpabilin kitang himsog inom sa Lutein Plus, Omega Plus and Primrose Plus of Gel. Inintanan available sa New Family Drug, Palma Drug sa Aquarian Pharmacy.
Pagdalaga o gulitaw na gani, kinahanglan limpyo ug hamis kanunay ang kutis. Gamit og Karisma Kojic Soap. Karisma Kojic Soap, pampahamis, pampaputi ug pampabata sa panit. Karisma Kojic Soap. Karisma Kojic Soap. Mao kini ang tubag alang sa mga teenager nga gusto makaangkon og nindot nga kutis. Karisma Kojic Soap. Karisma Kojic Soap. Karisma Kojic Soap. Karisma Kojic Soap. Ang sikreto sa mga gwapa o gwapo. Karisma Kojic Soap, mapalit sa inyong mga suking butika.
Mga Surigaonon, ana-anay maayong lugar na adtuan ang Interior Hub Home Furnishing Shop nga nahimutang sa Dalan Borromeo ning Dakbayan sa Surigao. Anaa kanila ang barato na mga gamit para sa pagpagwapa sa inyong banyo, kusina o tibuok balay. Nagtanyag sila sa mga packages, sa faucet, wash basin o toilet bowl with complete fittings na swak sa inyong budget. Sa Interior Hub Home Furnishing Shop, daghan kay kapilian, mga bagong mga designs o dekalidad ang mga produkto. Interior Hub Home Furnishing Shop, Borromeo Street, Surigao City. Owned and managed by Earl Brian Palma. Contact number 0945-30-60648.
EXL Makabuhay Plus, Health and Wellness for God's Glory.
Nakay pasyente ma'am no imong isuon o sa gibati ato ma'am.
Ang gibati ato niya dok, ikalihok yung mga lawas, ang ulo lang makalihok, ang dili, wala na di nakadaw yung lawas, bugab na nakaayo. Mandi maasa yang tiil. Makabuhay Plus lang jud tuloy ang sa Ginoo. Samsud nakalakaw na di siya dok. Primero ina niya pero hinga na di ang pamati, mga lihok na pagkatudis, makakaon na siya, makagulit na sa Makabuhay Plus lang jud tuloy ang sa Ginoo Dios. Interesting ipayan na namo nakakita niya ni sa Mumbalay na nagmotor na jud.
Sige pangalan nimo ma'am?
Charlene po, Dagaguri.
EXL Makabuhay Plus Dietary Supplement. Mapalit sa pinakadool nga butika o drugstore sa inyong lugar.
O, anyari sa'yo? Ba't nakasimangot ka? Alam ko na. Masakit ang katawan mo, ano? Sa sobrang trabaho? O di kaya masakit ang ulo sa sobrang stress? Break ka muna. Hinga ng malalim at imasahe ang ulo mo gamit ang Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Ako rin ganun eh. Kaya pag mataas ang tensyon sa trabaho, mag-Herbalaya break ka muna.
Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Amoy na kaaya-aya. Sa bawat pahid ay ginhawa.
I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and you're watching MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines, where your care always comes first. Filipinos over the age of 60 are among the age groups with the highest mortality rates due to pneumonia. And one type that can affect seniors is called aspiration pneumonia. Dr. Ivan, discuss natin with our viewers, what exactly is this at paano nangyayari ang aspiration pneumonia?
In general, when we say aspiration, it must be pointed out to our listeners that we do aspirate. We probably aspirate about 30 ml of fluid every night, when we sleep. Aspirate, bumabalik yung pagkain natin sa tiyan, pupunta ng baga natin. But it doesn't cause significant disease in many people, except for patients who are, you said, elderly. So that's difficult, and it's a challenge to manage aspiration pneumonia. You're not only thinking of gram-positive, gram-negative, anaerobic organisms, and which means you will be given expensive medications, no? So aspiration pneumonia is something that can be actually prevented, no? Kasi aspiration pneumonia may be witnessed or unwitnessed. Many times unwitnessed, hindi mo nakikita yan. Witnessed, yung nagmamadali kang pinapakain mo yung tatay mo, yung lolo mo. O di nag-aspirate yung si tatay, si lolo. Yeah, these are things that has to be emphasized to our patients.
What are some of the symptoms that people may see on the elderly? Could this be one of the causes why some of the elderly may fear of drinking water or eating food because ang pakiramdam nila nasasamid?
For some people who are healthy, the body will mount a defense. So lalagdatin yan, fever and even chills. For some people who are not immunocompetent, they're compromised, immunocompromised. Sometimes they don't mount a defense, so walang fever. Kaya ang fever ay isang senyalis siya ng maganda, nag-defend you, nagpuput up ng defense ang body mo eh. So those are the symptoms.
Dr. Jade, I'd like to go to ask you, how difficult is it in treating pneumonia in that of the elderly, and how important is it for preventionary measures, the vaccines and things like that?
In general, it is often more challenging to treat the senior citizens. Why? Because of the comorbidities that they usually have, the immune system status that they usually have. And I often tell this to my patients that our antibiotics, our treatment, it's only half of the process, and a good half or part of the influence of treatment success will be really dependent sa katawan mismo ng pasyente. No? So most of the time, these elderly patients are also prone to have multi-drug resistant organisms. Mm-hmm. Why? Because minsan sila po yung pabalik-balik na sa hospital, so they have recurrent hospital exposures, antibiotic exposures already. So minsan yung pong mga mikrobyo na meron po sila, mas matatapang na rin kumpara po sa younger individuals who haven't received any antibiotics before. If we can prevent pneumonias in the elderly, that would be the best way to go. Vaccination is one. So the pneumococcal vaccine and the influenza vaccine, it wouldn't necessarily mean that it prevents infection, but once patients develop pneumonia, it may not be as severe. They may not need hospitalization and they may not need ICU admission. So isa po yun sa benefits ng pneumonia. Now, we have to make that clear na hindi naman porke nabakunahan ka na, hindi ka na magkakaroon ng pneumonia, but it can be in a milder form. And that's really a big plus to get vaccinated.
Dr. Ivan, if there were 3 things that you would like our viewers to learn about pneumonia, what would they be?
The tips to prevent pneumonia will be, remember to incorporate these 5 habits into each day. Number 1, stop smoking. Number 2, you exercise regularly. Number 3, reduce your exposure to pollutants. Avoid your infections. How do we do that? You drink a lot of water, hindi soft drinks. Hindi po tubig ang soft drinks. You take your multivitamins, as mentioned by Dr. Jade, and breathe deeply. Mag-ano ka, breathing exercises. So by focusing a little of your energy on this task, these 5 tasks that I mentioned to you, you can help keep your lungs working optimally for life.
We hope you found our discussion today very helpful. Thank you to our esteemed guests, pulmonologist Dr. Ivan Villaspin and infectious disease specialist Dr. Jade Javier. We want to be your partner for a lifetime of good health. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines.
RPN Radio Philippines Network. Radyo Ronda DXKS Surigao.